Jake Morrison sat in the back of the large classroom, trying to remain invisible. The Galactic Military Academy on Zetara Prime was a place where the best cadets from across the galaxy came to study, and Jake was the only human. His pale skin, messy brown hair, and quiet demeanor made him blend into the background of his classmates, strange beings from all over the galaxy with scales, extra limbs, and glowing eyes. Jake didn't mind. He wasn't here for glory or fame. He just wanted to get through his education and go back to his normal life. But normalcy was never guaranteed when you carried the weight of humanity's history. The classroom was full of noise. 60 cadets, 12 different species, all talking at once. Each one wearing the same gray uniform, but each one as unique as the stars themselves. A few cadets had forearms where humans had hands, others had thick armored skin like the Caraxians. Some had 3 eyes, others had horns. There were whispers and chuckles as they exchanged stories, friendly and competitive jabs about their latest missions or battles. Despite the variety of alien species, there was one thing they all shared: the desire to succeed in the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy. Professor Zethara, the Veltarian instructor, a tall and thin figure with purple skin and 6 fingers on each hand, walked to the front of the room. She was one of the smartest strategists in the galaxy, known across the star systems for her unyielding intellect and tactical brilliance. She had seen more battles and conflicts than most of her cadets had seen stars. The room quieted immediately. Zethara raised one hand, and the murmurs faded away into silence. With one commanding gesture, the professor activated the holographic projectors around the room. Blue light filled the air as images materialized in front of the cadets. They gasped, mesmerized by the technology they were witnessing. To some of them, it was the first time they had seen such a detailed, real-time projection. It was like they were inside the very battles themselves. Today, Professor Zethara's voice echoed, amplified by a translator device that made it understandable to every species. We study real battles, not the kind written in our military textbooks, but the kind that change everything. Jake sat quietly in the back, feeling the tension rise in the room. He knew exactly what was coming next. We will begin with the siege of Kepler Station, Zethara continued, her voice carrying a weight Jake knew all too well. A battle that redefined the way we think about war. The footage started. The images flickered and shifted, showing the outer perimeter of Kepler Station under siege. Ships flew around the station, bright beams of energy shooting out into the vastness of space. Explosions lit up the dark, and the chaotic sounds of a battle filled the room. Inside the station, soldiers ran down dimly lit hallways. Some were wounded, others were running in fear, trying to escape the violence. Jake felt a knot tighten in his stomach as the footage played. He recognized the scene immediately. He had been there 3 years ago, fighting for his life, fighting for others' lives. The screen zoomed in on a young soldier, his face dirty, his uniform torn, blood smeared across his cheek. It was a human soldier, and Jake's heart started to beat faster. He knew what came next. Watch carefully, Professor Zethara instructed, as the cadets leaned forward in their seats. This individual, though untrained in advanced tactics, was responsible for the survival of the station. Observe how he fought. The footage intensified. The human soldier, despite the overwhelming odds, moved with strange confidence. He didn't run from the enemy. He used the environment to his advantage, blocking doors with debris, pulling weapons out of the wreckage. He ran through enemy fire to help fallen comrades, even though every instinct in him screamed to take cover. Time and time again, he should have died, but he didn't. Jake's mind raced. He could almost feel the familiar terror that surged through his veins in that moment. He remembered the fear, the feeling that death could come at any second. But he also remembered something else: his desire to help, his need to do something even if it seemed impossible. Watch this part, Professor Zethara said. Her voice cut through the intensity of the footage. The human soldier was now shouting orders, but they didn't sound like anything in the military manuals. He was improvising, using whatever he could find: pieces of broken machinery, overturned crates, anything that could give them a chance. Nothing he did made sense, but it worked. The most amazing part, Zethara said, came when the enemy broke through the station's main door. The battle seemed lost, but this soldier did something no one expected. The footage showed the soldier standing, weapon raised, yelling as loud as he could. He didn't move to the side, didn't take cover. He ran directly at the enemy. It was a suicide charge, or so it seemed. But it worked, Zethara said. The enemies were so taken aback by his audacity that they hesitated for just a moment. That moment was enough. Jake leaned forward in his seat, his breath catching in his chest. The footage showed the human soldier charging forward, fist raised, fighting with everything he had. The battle shifted. The defenders, inspired by the soldier's bravery, fought harder, and against all odds, the enemies started to retreat. The footage ended with the station in ruins. The human soldier, exhausted and covered in blood, was seen bandaging the wounds of another soldier. He looked up, gave a tired smile, and continued helping. No glory, no medals, just the simple act of doing what needed to be done. That soldier saved over 3,000 lives, Professor Zethara said, her voice heavy with awe. Military experts still study these recordings to understand how one person changed everything. The room was silent as the cadets absorbed what they had just witnessed. Most of them had heard stories about humans, but none of them had seen a human in action. The footage left them in disbelief. Could a single individual really be capable of such feats? Could one soldier, with no special training or weapons, really do what military leaders thought impossible? Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his mind racing. He could feel the eyes of his classmates on him, the human cadet, the only human in the room. Professor Zethara turned to face the class. This human soldier, she said slowly, had no special training, no special weapons, no reinforcements. But he did what we as highly trained cadets often hesitate to do. He made the impossible choice. Jake knew what was coming next. He knew that everyone in the room would be looking at him now. The footage had revealed his secret. And soon his fellow cadets would demand to know, what makes a human soldier so different? Jake's heart raced as the last echoes of the professor's words lingered in the air. The impossible choice. He felt the weight of those words pressing down on him. The class was silent, everyone absorbing what they had just witnessed. But for Jake, it wasn't just the footage that was under scrutiny, it was him. The room, usually full of laughter and the hum of conversation, was eerily quiet. Every eye seemed to be on him, though no one spoke. The footage had been a window into the past, into the soldier he had once been, but it was now a mirror reflecting Jake's secret. His classmates had no idea who he truly was, until now. He kept his head down, eyes fixed on the desk in front of him. His palms were sweaty. He tried to shrink further into his seat, but it was futile. The weight of his secret was too heavy to ignore, and the eyes of 60 cadets felt like a spotlight now. He wished he could disappear. Professor Zethara cleared her throat, snapping everyone back to attention. You will study this battle extensively. We will learn from it. It will change the way we view tactics. But for today, class is dismissed. She paused for a moment, looking at Jake. Cadet Morrison, please stay behind. I need to speak with you. Jake stood slowly, his legs feeling like they might give out. His classmates filed out of the room, but their whispers followed him, their eyes burning into his back. Did you see that? He was that soldier, the one from the footage. Jake Morrison, the hero. He could hear their murmurs, their disbelief. Some of them, especially the younger cadets, were whispering in awe, while others, Rex, the Veltarian upperclassman, looked at him with suspicion. Jake tried to ignore it, tried to block it out, but it was impossible. The story of his life at Kepler Station had just gone public in the most unexpected way. When the room had cleared, only Jake and Professor Zethara remained. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she walked to the center of the room, her steps echoing in the silence. She turned, her purple skin glowing under the dim light of the classroom, her 6 fingers interlaced in front of her. Sit down, Cadet Morrison, she said, her tone calm but firm. Jake obeyed, his breath shallow as he lowered himself back into the chair. He could feel the tension rising in his chest. He had no idea what Zethara was going to say next. He hadn't wanted anyone to know about Kepler Station. He hadn't wanted anyone to look at him like a hero. He was just a soldier, just someone who did what was necessary to survive. Zethara regarded him for a long moment before speaking. I imagine this is not how you wanted to be seen, she said, her voice softer now. But there is much more to you than your past. This footage shows us what humans are capable of, even under impossible circumstances. Jake opened his mouth to protest, but she raised a hand, silencing him. I do not mean to idolize you, Cadet Morrison, but I must admit your actions at Kepler Station are extraordinary. I've studied that footage more times than I can count. What you did there when all seemed lost is something few species, my own included, could ever do. Jake's throat tightened. I didn't want to be special, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I was just trying to help. I was scared, Professor, but I couldn't leave them. I couldn't let them die when I had the chance to do something. Zethara's gaze softened. "I understand," she said, sitting across from him now. "But you must realize that your actions had consequences. The entire academy is buzzing with your story. Cadet Morrison, you've become more than just a soldier. You've become a symbol. You've become an example of what humans can achieve." Jake looked down, his hands clenched into fists. He had always kept to himself, tried to blend in. He never wanted to be a symbol. He just wanted to get through the academy without anyone noticing him. Now everything had changed. "I didn't ask for this," Jake said, his voice firm. "I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want to be some legend. I just wanted to go back to being normal." Zethara leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. "There is no such thing as normal, Cadet Morrison, not when you've done something so extraordinary. You may not have asked for this, but now the question is, what will you do with it?" Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. He didn't know. He hadn't thought this far ahead. All he wanted was to survive, to get through the academy and go back to a quiet life. But he knew it wasn't that simple anymore. "Don't hide from this," Zethara said, her voice calm but insistent. "You have the power to change things, to shape the future of this academy, of this galaxy. Your actions at Kepler Station showed that a single individual can turn the tide of a battle. A single person can make a difference." Jake shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I was just doing what anyone would do when their friends are in danger." Zethara smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "That's where you're wrong. Not everyone can act in the heat of the moment. Not everyone has what you have inside of you, the ability to act even when you're scared, to put others before yourself even when it means risking your own life." Jake was silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling over him. He had always tried to downplay what he had done. He had always told himself it was just survival, just instinct. But what Zethara was saying made him question everything. Maybe he had done something more than just survive. "I'll think about it," Jake finally said, his voice barely audible. Zethara stood, her posture straight and dignified. "I'm not asking you to change your past, but I am asking you to consider your future. The galaxy is watching, Cadet Morrison. What happens next is up to you." Jake stood as well, his mind spinning with questions. His identity had been revealed. He was no longer just a cadet at the academy. He was the soldier from the footage. And now he had to figure out what that meant for him and what it meant for humanity. As he walked out of the classroom, the whispers from his fellow cadets hit him like a wave. "That's him, the one from the footage. I didn't think humans could be like that. So bold. He saved 3,000 lives. Is that even possible?" Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he walked down the corridor. He could feel every eye on him, feel the weight of their curiosity. He tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. He wasn't just another cadet anymore. He was Jake Morrison, the hero from Kepler Station. And now he had a choice to make. As Jake walks through the academy, the door to a nearby room slams open. Rex, the Veltarian cadet who had been suspicious of him earlier, steps out, his eyes blazing with challenge. "I heard the rumors," Rex sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're the soldier from the footage. So tell me, Morrison, do you really think you can back up that hero image? Or are you just like the rest of us, nothing special?" Jake stopped in his tracks, the challenge in Rex's voice echoing in the silence. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. He could feel the eyes of his fellow cadets on him again. This time, the challenge wasn't a quiet whisper. It was a test of everything he had become. Jake froze, his heart skipping a beat. Rex's voice cut through the murmurs of the hallway like a knife demanding attention. It was a challenge, and everyone in the vicinity knew it. "Do you really think you're special, Morrison?" Rex sneered, his tall, muscular frame towering over Jake. The crowd of cadets gathered around them seemed to form a ring, silently watching the encounter unfold. "You're the hero from Kepler Station, right? So prove it." Jake's fingers twitched, a mixture of anger and anxiety coursing through him. His throat tightened, but he couldn't back down now. He wasn't just the cadet from Kepler Station anymore. He wasn't just trying to survive. The galaxy and his classmates were waiting for him to decide who he would be from this moment on. He locked eyes with Rex, a Veltarian upperclassman known for his pride and physical prowess. Veltarians were a race of highly intelligent, physically intimidating beings, with 4 strong arms and a warrior-like mentality. Rex was used to winning, used to being the top dog, and now, it seemed, he was determined to test Jake's worth. "What's the matter, Morrison?" Rex taunted, stepping closer, his 4 arms folding across his chest. "Afraid to prove your legend is more than just a story." Jake opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. He wasn't afraid of Rex or the challenge he posed. What bothered him was the pressure, the weight of being thrust into the role of the hero without asking for it. The eyes of the Academy were on him, and they were waiting for something, anything, that would confirm the stories they had heard. The crowd hushed, sensing the tension building between them. Jake glanced around. Some of the cadets looked excited, eager to see Jake prove himself. Others looked uncomfortable, unsure whether they should intervene. But the reality was clear. Jake had no choice but to face Rex's challenge head-on. "What do you want from me, Rex?" Jake finally asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "A fight. You think that'll prove something?" Rex grinned, a look of amusement flashing across his face. "Not just a fight, Morrison. I want to see if you're really as tough as the stories say. Show me you're worthy of that hero status." He turned to the crowd, his voice rising. "Let's see if humans really have what it takes. If you can survive a challenge from me, maybe I'll start believing the stories." Jake felt a rush of heat flush through his body. He had never been one for public displays, especially not fights. The idea of standing in front of the entire academy, the weight of their expectations pressing down on him, made him want to run. But he had already made a choice. He couldn't back out now, not when Rex was demanding a performance. "I'm not here to put on a show, Rex," Jake replied, his words firm. "But if you want to test me, then fine, but I'm not doing it for your entertainment." The Veltarian scoffed. "Fine, but if you lose, don't expect me to let you walk away with your pride intact." He stepped back, motioning to the rest of the cadets. "Clear the way. Let's see if this human really has what it takes." The cadets parted, creating a circle. Jake didn't move. He stood there, his fists clenched at his sides, trying to steady his breath. He couldn't afford to let his emotions take over. This wasn't just about a fight. It was about showing that he wasn't the legend the galaxy thought he was. He wasn't some unbeatable hero. He was just Jake Morrison, a human who didn't know how to quit when people were counting on him. Rex cracked his knuckles and grinned again. "You ready?" he asked, his voice dripping with arrogance. Jake exhaled slowly, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. He knew Rex's strength. He had seen it in the way he moved, the way he carried himself. But Jake wasn't interested in playing Rex's game. He needed to find a way to outthink him. That's how humans survived, by being resourceful, adaptable. He could rely on that. "I'm ready," Jake said quietly but firmly. Without warning, Rex lunged at him. His forearms shot out like a coordinated strike, aiming to overpower Jake before he had a chance to react. But Jake wasn't quick to engage. Instead, he sidestepped, his body moving with the fluidity of someone who had learned to survive through instinct rather than brute strength. Rex was fast, but Jake was faster in a way that couldn't be measured by strength alone. As Rex swung at him again, Jake ducked low, narrowly avoiding the blow, and pushed himself forward, using the momentum to create space between them. "Not bad," Rex muttered, his eyes narrowing in frustration. "But it's going to take more than that to beat me." Jake didn't respond. He knew Rex was baiting him, trying to get him to fight on his terms. But Jake's mind was already racing, analyzing the situation. He couldn't overpower Rex, but he could outmaneuver him. Rex's forearms might make him look invincible, but they also made him predictable. Rex charged again, more aggressively this time, determined to corner Jake. But this time, Jake didn't dodge. He didn't back away. Instead, as Rex closed in, Jake pivoted to the side and grabbed one of Rex's forearms. Using the Veltarian's own momentum against him, Jake twisted and threw him off balance, sending him crashing into the ground with a loud thud. The cadets gasped, surprised by the sudden turn of events. Rex struggled to rise, his pride stinging as he pushed himself back up, his forearms bracing against the floor. Jake took a step back, giving Rex room to regain his footing. He didn't want to humiliate him, he just wanted to show that he wasn't the kind of hero people expected. He was a survivor, a fighter, but not in the way Rex had assumed. "Not bad for a human," Rex growled, getting back to his feet. He wiped some dirt from his face, his expression hardening. "But don't think that was the end of it." The Veltarian lunged once more, this time more carefully. He knew Jake's moves now. The fight slowed as both combatants circled each other, eyes locked, calculating their next moves. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his focus. He couldn't let Rex's pride or the pressure of the audience dictate his actions. It was then that Jake noticed something. Rex's legs, strong but not as fast as his arms, were beginning to show signs of fatigue. He was overextending himself, trying too hard to finish the fight. Jake saw his chance. In a flash of movement, Jake dropped low and swept Rex's legs out from under him, sending the Veltarian crashing to the floor once again. This time, Jake was quicker, using his momentum to pin Rex down. Rex struggled beneath him, but Jake held him firm, his grip tighter than Rex anticipated. "It's over, Rex," Jake said quietly, his voice calm but with a finality that rang through the circle of cadets. The crowd was silent, no one moved. Rex's breathing slowed and he stared up at Jake, his pride crushed, but there was a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "You're not like the others," he muttered. "I underestimated you." Jake stood up, his chest heaving with adrenaline. "I don't want to be special, Rex. I'm just trying to do what's right when it matters." The crowd slowly began to disperse, some cadets still whispering in awe while others looked at Jake with uncertainty. But one thing was clear. Jake Morrison had proven something in that fight. Not that he was unbeatable, but that he could stand up, even when faced with impossible odds. As the crowd began to dissipate, Jake's mind still raced with the weight of the moment. He was exhausted, but before he could leave the area, a voice from behind called out. "Morrison," it said, "you think this is over? You think you've proved anything?" Jake turned slowly to see the figure of a high-ranking officer stepping out from the shadows of the hallway. The officer's eyes narrowed, a cold smile crossing their lips. The real test is yet to come. Jake's heart skipped a beat as the officer stepped into view. The figure was tall, imposing, and dressed in a sleek uniform that marked them as part of the Academy's leadership. Someone with authority, someone who had seen far more battles than Jake ever had. The officer's sharp, angular face was lit by the dim lights of the corridor. Their skin was a pale shade of blue, with silver tattoos running along the jawline, a sign of their status in the military. Jake had seen them around the academy, but never in such close proximity. "You think this is over, Morrison?" The officer's voice was calm, almost mocking as they took a few steps forward, their eyes never leaving Jake. "You've impressed some of the cadets, but you've only just begun. Your real test is not here." Jake stood still, the adrenaline from the fight still coursing through him. His body was sore, his muscles aching, but he wasn't going to back down now, not from this. "Who are you?" Jake asked, trying to steady his breath. "What do you want?" The officer's lips curled into a faint smile. "I'm Captain Vulcan, head of the Tactical Division. I've been watching you, Cadet Morrison. Your little show here. It's not the end of the line for you. You've made quite the impression with your human ingenuity." Jake's pulse quickened. The mention of his ingenuity wasn't comforting. It felt like a trap, one he was about to step right into. "I'm not interested in being some military display," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing unease in his stomach. "I just want to be left alone. Let me finish my training like everyone else." Captain Vulcan's eyes darkened. "Oh, you will finish your training, but you'll be doing it on my terms. You see, Morrison, there's a war brewing, and we need people like you, people who don't know how to quit, no matter how impossible the odds seem. People who can turn the tide of a battle with nothing but sheer willpower." Jake's stomach churned. "A war? What are you talking about? I'm just a cadet. I have no business." "You have more business than you think," Vulcan interrupted him smoothly. "We're not offering you a choice, Cadet. I'm giving you an opportunity. You'll come with me to the front lines, not as a cadet, but as a leader. Your actions at Kepler Station, they've earned you a position. You'll be joining a special task force, a team that's going to need every bit of human resourcefulness to succeed." Jake felt his breath catch. This wasn't what I signed up for. "I didn't join the academy to fight a war," Jake muttered, shaking his head. "I joined to learn to be left in peace, not to be a soldier again." Captain Vulcan's expression didn't waver. "The war doesn't care what you want, Morrison. It only cares about who can help win it. We've seen what you're capable of. And now, you're going to help us make sure humanity isn't left behind when the fighting starts." Jake stared at the officer, his mind racing. He remembered the chaos of Kepler Station, the panic, the terror. How he had survived by sheer determination and the need to protect others. The thought of doing that again, but this time on an even larger scale, made his stomach churn. He wasn't ready for this. "You're asking me to risk my life," Jake said, a touch of defiance creeping into his voice. "To fight for something I don't even understand. Why should I help you?" Vulcan's eyes narrowed as though they were reading Jake's every thought. "You've already helped more than you realize. You've proven that you're capable of sacrificing for others, something that not all of us have mastered. It's what makes you invaluable." The galaxy needs people like you to make the hard choices, to do the things no one else will, and I'll make sure you're rewarded for it." Jake clenched his fists. He didn't want to be part of this. He had already proven what he could do once. He didn't need to prove it again. But the pressure of Vulcan's gaze and the weight of the situation pushed him to the brink. "What happens if I refuse?" Jake asked, his voice shaky but resolute. Vulcan took a step closer, his expression cold but not unkind. "You'll go back to your dormitory, finish your training like everyone else, but you won't be given another opportunity like this. And the war, it'll happen with or without you." Jake swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if he could trust Vulcan or if he even wanted to. But what did he really have left to fight for? A peaceful life? That was already slipping away. His classmates were watching him, waiting for him to decide. He could feel their eyes on him, their expectations growing with each passing second. He could turn it down. He could go back to being an ordinary cadet, fade into the background like he had always planned. But Jake knew, deep down, that wasn't who he was anymore. The fight at Kepler Station had shown him something. He didn't have to be extraordinary, he just had to do what was right. "I'll do it," Jake said, his voice steady, though his heart raced in his chest. "I'll join your task force." Captain Vulcan's expression softened just slightly, as if the decision was what they had expected. "Good. We'll leave in 3 days. Pack what you need and be ready. This is the beginning of something that will change everything." Cliffhanger, as Jake turned to walk away, his mind swirling with the weight of his decision, a voice stopped him in his tracks. It was familiar, soft yet filled with concern. "Jake, wait." He turned to see Kira, the Zephyrian cadet who had always been kind to him, standing a few feet away. Her eyes were filled with worry. "I heard what you said," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You're really going to do this? You don't have to, there's still time to back out." Jake met her gaze, his heart sinking as he saw the concern in her eyes. "I don't have a choice, Kira. The war is coming. I have to do this." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "Just be careful, please, Jake. You're not alone in this." Jake gave her a small, bittersweet smile. "I know, but I can't be afraid anymore." As Kira nodded and walked away, Jake turned and began the long walk to his dormitory. His mind raced with what lay ahead. He had made his choice. But it was a choice that could change the course of everything. And as he prepared for the journey ahead, one thing was certain. There was no turning back. Just as Jake reached his dormitory door, he heard a sudden burst of laughter from a group of cadets in the hallway. He paused, then looked back, only to see Rex standing there, flanked by several others. The smug look on Rex's face was unmistakable. "So, Morrison," Rex said with a grin, "ready to prove yourself on the front lines, or are you just running from another challenge?" Jake hesitated for a moment, the laughter from Rex and the others ringing in his ears. The group of cadets was gathered near the hallway, and their eyes fixed on Jake with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Rex stood at the front, looking pleased with himself, his arms crossed in front of his chest. Behind him, a few others, cadets from different species, most of them from higher classes, watched, their expressions a mix of amusement and judgment. "You really think you can just walk into the battlefield, Morrison?" Rex's voice was louder now, dripping with derision. "You'll be dead before you can even pull a trigger." Jake swallowed hard, but he refused to let Rex's words get under his skin. He knew what Rex was trying to do, poke at him, break him, humiliate him in front of the others. It was a game to Rex, but to Jake it felt like something much bigger. He wasn't just proving something to Rex, he was proving it to himself. He couldn't let his fear show. "You've been talking a big game since the fight," Jake said, his voice steady, though a storm churned inside him. "I'm not interested in your opinion, Rex. I'm doing what I have to do, whether you like it or not." Rex laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed down the hallway. "Oh, I like it. I like it a lot. You humans are all the same, so eager to prove yourselves, but you don't belong out there. You're going to get people killed. You'll see." Jake's breath quickened. He wanted to retort, to take a swing at Rex for all the things he had said. But he knew that wasn't the right way to handle it. No more fighting for show, he reminded himself. He wasn't going to fight Rex because of his pride. Not again. This was bigger than that. "So you're going to stand here and talk about how I'm going to die," Jake said, stepping forward, his gaze hardening. "But you won't be the one pulling the trigger. You won't be the one making the hard decisions when lives are on the line." Rex sneered, and a few of the cadets around him laughed, but there was a flicker of something in Rex's eyes. Was it doubt? Jake couldn't be sure. But he wasn't going to stand there and let Rex think he'd won this game. He had already made his decision, and it wasn't going to be swayed by someone who couldn't see beyond their own arrogance. "I'm not asking for your approval, Rex," Jake continued, his voice growing stronger. "I'm doing this because I can. I've seen what happens when people stand by and do nothing. I won't be that person." Rex took a step toward Jake, his broad frame looming in the space between them. The others fell silent, sensing the tension growing between the two cadets. Jake's pulse hammered in his ears, but he held his ground. There was no turning back now. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" Rex growled, his eyes narrowing. "You think your little hero act at Kepler Station gives you some kind of edge? Well, let me tell you something. There's no room for heroes on the front lines. You're just going to get yourself and everyone else killed." The words stung, but Jake didn't flinch. He had been through worse. He had faced death countless times at Kepler Station, and each time he had made it through because he wasn't afraid to act, to do what was necessary. Rex might have had the physical strength, but Jake had something else. Something that couldn't be measured in muscles or battle strategies. "I don't need to be better than you, Rex," Jake said quietly, his voice calm but resolute. "I just need to be the one who gets people home, and I'll do whatever it takes." There was a moment of silence, an electric tension hanging in the air. Rex stared at Jake, his expression unreadable. For a brief second, Jake saw a flicker of uncertainty in Rex's eyes. Maybe it was doubt, maybe it was something else entirely, but Jake didn't wait for Rex to react. He turned, his back to the cadet, and walked away. "Good luck, Morrison," Rex called after him, his voice edged with a hint of something like begrudging respect. Or perhaps it was just a twisted version of it. "You'll need it." Jake didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He had nothing to prove to Rex. But Rex had proven something to him. The Veltarian cadet might have been confident in his strength and his reputation. But what Jake had, what humanity had, was something Rex couldn't understand. Resilience, determination, and the will to do what was right even when it didn't make sense. Jake walked back to his dormitory, the weight of the challenge and the pressure of the upcoming mission settling over him. He had made his choice. There was no going back, and now, more than ever, he had to prove it wasn't just luck. He wasn't some hero who got by on a whim. He was a human, and humans acted when it mattered. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparations. Jake gathered his things, packing light, no weapons, no extra gear. He didn't need them. What he needed was his mind, his resourcefulness. He didn't know what awaited him on the front lines, but he knew that the only way to survive was to think outside the box, to adapt to every new situation, to do whatever it took to protect the people who needed him. As the day of departure arrived, Jake stood in front of the Academy's gates, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He had said his goodbyes, at least the ones he could say. There was a part of him that wondered if this was the last time he would see the Academy, if this was the last time he would be able to walk freely among his fellow cadets. But there was no time for second-guessing. A small transport ship stood waiting at the Academy's landing platform. Captain Vulcan was already on board, his cold gaze scanning the horizon. Jake walked toward the ship, his steps resolute. The others, human and alien alike, were already aboard, preparing for the mission ahead. But as Jake climbed aboard and the hatch sealed behind him, he felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. This was where he needed to be. The war was out there, waiting, and it was up to him to help humanity find its place in it. As the ship's engines roared to life, Jake looked out the small viewport. In the distance, the stars stretched out like an endless sea. But there was something else out there, too. A ship larger than any he had seen before loomed in the distance. Its silhouette was unmistakable. "We're not the only ones out here," Jake muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. The ship was moving toward them. Vulcan's voice came through the intercom, low and grave. "Hold on, cadets. We've just entered enemy territory." The hum of the ship's engines filled the air as Jake stood at the viewport, staring out at the endless void of space. His mind raced with the unknowns ahead. The war, the battles, the decisions that would shape not only his future but humanity's place in this vast galaxy. He had chosen to follow Captain Vulcan into the unknown, and now, as the Academy's transport ship drifted deeper into enemy territory, Jake wondered if he had made the right choice. The threat looming before them was massive, an unknown alien fleet, one that could spell disaster for humanity if they weren't prepared. Behind him, the other cadets were preparing for the mission ahead, some nervously checking their weapons and equipment, others sitting in silence, clearly lost in their own thoughts. The quiet tension in the air was palpable. The ship had grown smaller with every passing minute, and Jake felt the weight of the responsibility settle on his shoulders. The group was relying on him, whether they realized it or not. As the minutes passed, Captain Vulcan's voice came through the ship's intercom, commanding and calm. "Prepare yourselves. We're going to drop into enemy territory. You'll be given specific assignments once we reach the front lines. You've trained for this moment. Now it's time to prove your worth." Jake's heart pounded in his chest as the ship's engines fired up, and the familiar sensation of acceleration pushed him back into his seat. The last few days had been a blur: preparation, briefings, and the daunting realization that this was no longer just an exercise. They were about to face real combat. "Jake," a voice called, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Kira. She had been unusually quiet since he had made the decision to join the task force, but now she approached him with a concerned expression. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with genuine care. Jake nodded, though the tightness in his chest told a different story. "I'm fine, just thinking about what's coming next." Kira studied him for a moment, her blue-green eyes never leaving his face. "You don't have to do this, you know," she said quietly. "You could still back out. The Academy would probably give you another chance." Jake shook his head. "No, I made my choice. I have to follow through." "I know," Kira said, sitting beside him. "But I just want you to be careful. Not all battles are won with strength. Sometimes the right choice is to stand down, not fight." Jake looked at her, his gaze steady. "I understand that, but this isn't just about fighting. This is about protecting the people who can't protect themselves. We've seen what happens when we just stand by and do nothing. I won't make that mistake again." Kira's face softened, and she gave him a small smile. "Just promise me you'll think before you act, okay? You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "I'm not trying to prove anything," Jake said, his voice firm. "I just want to do what's right." Before Kira could respond, an alarm sounded, cutting through the ship's calm atmosphere. Jake's pulse quickened as the lights shifted, signaling the onset of combat. "This is it," Captain Vulcan's voice crackled over the intercom. "Prepare for deployment. We'll be entering the battlefield in 5 minutes." Jake's stomach twisted. There was no more time for second-guessing, no time to prepare further. This was it, the moment that would define everything. He couldn't afford to hesitate. The cadets were quickly ushered into their designated teams, their assignments flashing across their screens. Jake's team consisted of Kira, Dex, Sarah, and a few others. They would be tasked with disabling an enemy communication hub deep within the enemy's stronghold. The mission was simple enough on paper: infiltrate, disable the systems, and get out. But Jake knew better than to believe anything would be simple. He checked his gear, standard-issue weapons, communicators, and a few tools for the mission, though, as always, he wasn't relying on them as much as his wits. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. But he was something that could make a difference: resourceful, adaptable, and capable of seeing solutions where others saw problems. The ship lurched as it broke through the atmosphere of the enemy planet, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. The view from the viewport was a chaotic mix of burning wreckage, the aftermath of battles fought and lost. In the distance, massive structures loomed like silent sentinels, their angular designs unmistakable. This was their destination, the heart of the enemy's forces. "Everyone into the drop pods," Captain Vulcan's voice rang out over the comms. "We're deploying in 2 minutes." Cadets moved quickly, their faces a mix of nerves and determination. Jake followed Kira into the drop pod, his mind racing through the plan. They would be dropped onto the outskirts of the enemy stronghold near the communication center. Once there, they'd need to move quickly, disable the systems, and extract without alerting the enemy. Easy enough in theory. But Jake wasn't fooled by simplicity. The real challenge lay in the unknowns, the unexpected twists that would test everything they had trained for. The pod's hatch slammed shut, and the countdown began. Jake could feel the heat from the atmosphere on the other side of the hull, the pressure rising as they accelerated toward the surface. "Everyone ready?" Kira asked, her voice calm despite the tension. She was trying to keep everyone focused. She was good at that, steady when the world was falling apart. "Ready," Jake said, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. The pod shook violently as it made its descent, and Jake gritted his teeth against the pressure. He had trained for this moment, but there was no preparation that could truly ready him for the chaos of combat. It was all too real now. The pod slammed into the ground, the impact rattling Jake's bones. The hatch flew open and the squad immediately scrambled out, weapons raised, scanning their surroundings. But what greeted them wasn't what they expected. A horde of enemy soldiers, their faces obscured by battle gear, stood waiting for them, waiting in perfect formation. And they weren't alone. From behind the enemy ranks, a massive figure emerged, an alien war machine, towering over the field, its guns primed and ready. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light as it turned toward Jake's team, the heavy metallic clank of its steps shaking the ground beneath them. "This isn't just a communications hub," Jake muttered under his breath, his eyes widening in shock. "It's a trap." The team froze, the weight of their situation crashing down on them. They had just landed in the heart of the enemy's strongest defensive position, and it was clear now. They were not the hunters, they were the prey. The metallic thud of the war machine's heavy footsteps echoed through the battlefield, reverberating in Jake's chest. His heart pounded, adrenaline coursing through his veins, but the fear he felt was not the kind that paralyzed. It was the kind that sharpened every sense, every muscle. The threat had just escalated in a way he hadn't anticipated, and now the stakes were higher than ever. The enemy soldiers around them raised their weapons, eyes narrowed through the slits of their helmets. A quiet tension settled in the air as Jake's team, now fully exposed in the open, began to calculate their next move. There was no cover, no retreat. The pod had landed them in the middle of an enemy stronghold, a place that was supposed to be lightly guarded, a communications relay at the edge of enemy territory. Now Jake could see the truth. The communications hub was a diversion. This was an ambush. "We need to move," Kira shouted, pulling Jake from his thoughts. "They've got the high ground. If we don't take cover now, we're dead." Jake snapped into action, his mind already working through the best course of action. He could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air. The enemy had outmaneuvered them, but he wasn't about to let that be the end. "Dex, take the left flank. Sarah, move to cover on the right," Jake barked as his instincts took over. He didn't wait for the team to respond. He moved fast, not caring if they followed or not. It was the only choice. His legs were already in motion before he had finished the command, darting behind a nearby wrecked vehicle that provided scant cover. "Jake," Kira called after him, but there was no time to explain. They had to make it to safety before the war machine's guns turned them into scrap metal. The sound of plasma fire sizzled through the air as Jake ducked behind the vehicle, pulling his weapon from its holster. The war machine had opened fire, its massive cannon sweeping across the battlefield. A heavy shot tore into the ground near their drop zone, sending dirt and debris flying into the air. The sheer force of the blast sent a shockwave that rattled Jake's teeth. He looked over to Kira, who was taking cover beside him, eyes scanning the field. "We're pinned down," Jake said, voice low but firm. "If we stay here, we'll be sitting ducks. We need to find a way to neutralize that thing before it wipes us out." Kira looked at him, her eyes wide with urgency. "How do you plan to do that? We don't have the firepower to take it down head-on." Jake's eyes flicked to the war machine's massive frame, its armor almost impenetrable. But there was a flaw, as there always was in every design. It wasn't indestructible. He could already see the vulnerability in its movement patterns, how it focused too much on heavy fire from a distance, leaving the rear and flanks weak. "We're not going to fight it," Jake said quietly, his mind racing. "We're going to outsmart it. We need to create a distraction, something that'll force it to turn its back." Kira blinked at him, and then realization dawned. "The communication hub," she said. "We use it as bait, but it's going to take everything we have to make it work." Jake nodded. "Exactly, we don't have much time, get ready." In that moment, the rest of the squad came into view, moving quickly and silently as they flanked around the war machine. Dex, with his Caraxian strength, was setting up explosives on the far side of the enemy forces, while Sarah and Cole moved to secure the communication hub, their aim clear. It wasn't about brute force. It was about strategy. They had to make the machine's weaponry their disadvantage. The heavy hum of the war machine's engines thrummed louder as it lumbered toward their position, its laser cannon lighting up, sweeping across the battlefield with deadly precision. But Jake wasn't focused on that. He was already thinking 5 steps ahead. The enemy was aggressive but predictable. If they could make enough noise, enough chaos, the war machine would make the mistake of overextending its reach. Jake pulled a small device from his pack, a jamming signal generator. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to make the enemy think there was a bigger threat nearby, one that was more important than the cadets standing in front of them. Get ready, Jake murmured to Kira, who was still by his side, holding her breath. Now or never. He activated the jammer, sending a pulse of interference into the enemy's comms. The war machine faltered for a moment, its sensors confused. It paused, its guns swiveling erratically, scanning for the source of the disruption. Now, Jake yelled. The team moved. Sarah and Cole rushed forward, planting charges near the communication hub while Dex triggered the explosives he had placed on the left flank. The blast was deafening, a sharp crack that echoed through the battlefield. The war machine roared, shifting its attention toward the explosion. The opportunity was now. Move in, Jake ordered. With a coordinated effort, the team surged forward, using the war machine's distraction to flank it. It was moving slower now, turning its guns toward the explosion and away from Jake's team. But that gave them just enough of a window to strike. Jake sprinted forward, his legs pushing harder than they had in weeks. The distance between him and the war machine was closing fast, but he knew that one wrong move and they were done for. The machine's massive frame loomed closer, its weapon systems now focusing on the new threat. The plan was risky, but it was working. Jake dove to the side as the war machine's turret snapped toward him, and just as it did, Dex's explosive charge detonated on the opposite side. The machine staggered, momentarily disoriented. That was all Jake needed. He slid into position, pulling out his plasma cutter. He wasn't trying to destroy the machine. He was trying to disable it to make it fight with one less arm. The cutter slid into the exposed joint of the war machine's back leg, and with a steady hand, Jake triggered the plasma beam. The joint crackled and sparked, and the leg suddenly buckled. The war machine's massive form tilted, its balance disrupted. It fired wildly, missing Jake's team as they scrambled to take cover. But they had done it. They had exposed its weakness. Keep pushing, Jake shouted, his voice full of adrenaline. As the team rallied, they launched one final wave of attacks, combining precise shots and tactical strikes. The war machine's defenses crumpled, and with a final screech of metal, it collapsed to the ground in a cloud of smoke and dust. Jake stood in the middle of the chaos, his chest heaving. His team was alive. The machine was disabled. The impossible had been done. And as the smoke cleared, a thought settled in Jake's mind. This is what humans do. We don't win with strength or superior tech. We win with our will to survive, and we'll keep winning no matter the odds. Conclusion: Jake's team had made it through their first real test, against an enemy that outnumbered them, outpowered them, and outwitted them. They had survived because they trusted each other, adapted to the situation, and used their human ingenuity to outmaneuver the impossible. The rest of the galaxy had underestimated humanity, but now, with every battle fought and every impossible victory earned, they would learn. Humanity might be young in the galactic community, but they were not to be dismissed. Not anymore. As the team stood victorious, Captain Vulcan approached, his face unreadable. He didn't offer praise, but Jake didn't expect it. He knew what was coming. You did well, Vulcan said. But this was just the beginning. There will be more battles, more obstacles. The real fight starts now. Jake nodded, his resolve hardening. The real fight hadn't even begun yet, but as long as he had breath in his body, he would keep fighting. Humanity wasn't finished, not by a long shot.